Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Arcane Bride. Episode 12. Chapter 84. Dulsanra. I was whisked around by Rose and Rehana, meeting different people. But I just wanted to sit in the corner and play with Dante and Azura Rain. They were so cute. I was curious as to why Rayhan had abruptly turned and left, but Rehana assured me that he'd be back soon. So pretty, Dante said, now holding my hands. I looked down at him, wondering if he saw my demon form. I know he held a lot of power, a power that was suppressed by an amulet given to Kiara and the king by Janina, but I did wonder if he could see my real form way before we even knew of it. Thank you, my little handsome prince, I replied. He gave me a small smile, while holding my hand tightly. Oh, Rayhan would be so jealous. Rayhana laughed. I didn't miss how her eyes kept flittering to Chris. Just then, Alpha Marcel approached us. Dulsanra, he said, smiling slightly. Alpha Marcel. Marcel is fine. Congratulations on everything you have accomplished, he said. Thank you, I said, brushing my hair back. Did Leo not come? I don't see him. He frowned, and I could sense worry from him. Oh no, you know how young boys just want to play, and they hate these types of parties. He didn't want to come, he said nonchalantly. I nodded, but there was only partial truth in his reply. I wondered what it was, but his next words made me forget everything. But I brought someone else, a surprise for you. He stepped aside and I looked at the woman before me. It took me a few seconds to realize what it was. Del, we weren't really friends, but I had been in the cells next to her as she began forming into a Wendigo, the only person I could call somewhat a friend. She closed the gap between us and hugged me tightly. I am so glad you are alive, she whispered. I hugged her back. Were there really people who wanted me alive before I met Rayhan? I never got to thank you for everything you did for me. Your support when I was drowning in fear of turning into a Wendigo. She moved back and took my hands, much to Dante's annoyance. I'm glad you are safe, I said to her. She nodded. Alpha Marcel told me you were actually asking about me, she said, smiling happily. Her gaze flickered to my neck. The mark of Alpha Rayhan Rossi. He is a heartthrob. I looked at her, surprised, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was awe or envy. You're mated, I said, not missing the mark that was on show from her strapless black dress. I am, but that doesn't mean I can't admire the Alpha who is known to be a heartthrob, she said, smiling. I smiled, feeling a little possessive of my yum. He is, I said. I'm glad, you deserved the best, she said proudly. I smiled. Can we exchange numbers? Yes, she said, reaching into her dress from the top and taking her phone out, making Dante blink as he tilted his head. We exchanged numbers before I made sure to thank Alpha Marcel for his kind gesture. We didn't get to chat for long as more people came over to greet me. It was a short while later, and I was curious where Rayhan was. I needed to find him. Excusing myself from the rest, I began searching for him. I asked a few people, mostly those who looked approachable. A few girls were giving me envious looks, so I decided to avoid asking the entire female population. Finally, I was directed around the side, and I soon picked up on him and the king talking. The music faded away as I made my way towards them. My heart ached at Rayhan's words, and I stopped in my tracks. I don't know what memories Magdalene had probed in my mind, but whatever he had seen was affecting him. My heart ached at that, and I stayed back, masking my presence, but his next words made me unable to stop myself. I don't want her to know how I feel. She's been through so much, I don't want to add to her burden. He said from where he was sitting, head lowered, his hair curtaining his face. My heart broke seeing him like that. He was so strong in front of me. But my pain caused him pain. It's not a burden, I said, stepping out from around the side of the mansion. Both men turned and looked at me, but my eyes were on my alpha. Kitten, he said, standing up to his full height. God, he was gorgeous. Yet when I was in pain, why was he suffering so much at my cost? Yum yum. I replied blushing lightly, realizing I had just said that in front of his uncle, who snickered. I'll leave you two to it, he said standing up. I looked at them both standing there, thinking once upon a time I would have run for the hills if I saw these two deadly men standing here, but now I knew that they won't hurt me. The king walked towards me, stopping in front of me. He looked down at me. You're a brave one, Spitfire, and we will get revenge on all those who hurt you, he said quietly. I didn't know how to respond, and so I simply settled for a nod. He didn't seem fazed, I could sense his pain, and it still shocked me. How could they all be so loving? Because this was my family, they considered me family. That's our promise to you, he added, gripping the back of my head. He pulled me closer and placed a kiss on top of my head, much to my surprise. I looked up at him, and he gave me a small smirk. Now go cheer up your yum yum, he mocked, snickering. I smiled at that. Well, you're a burrito, I said. His smirk vanished and it was now my turn to smirk. A what? A burrito, I said, walking past him and towards Rayhan. The king grumbled as Rayhan chuckled. Be proud, he said as I reached him. Our eyes met and he pulled me into his arms. Yeah, don't go saying that shit to anyone, the king muttered before he walked off, leaving the two of us alone. I inhaled Rayhan's scent, before looking up at him. Don't be sad, and don't try to hide your emotions from me, Rayhan. I'm stronger than you're stronger than everyone. I know, I just don't want to bring you down. You've been through so much it hurts, he said, his eyes held so many emotions that I felt like crying myself. My pain was his pain. And I could see it. Rayhan, I'm happy, being with you makes all my pain mean nothing, and I'm sorry that you had to see all that. Kitten, don't apologize. In a way, I'm glad I did. The extent to what you've been through, at the hands of werewolves. It's a miracle you even gave me a chance, he said. I tiptoed and he leant down, allowing me to kiss him, kissing me back softly yet passionately. I think the food was very tempting, so I had to stick around for it. I said with a small pout. He smiled. Oh yeah? Then how about we go get some more food to keep you happy? Sounds good. I said as he lifted me bridal style. I can walk. I never said you couldn't. Rayhan. I think my thong is on show. I mumbled, trying to pull my dress down fruitlessly. His eyes flashed green and I blushed. Oh yeah? Maybe I should take a look. Rayhan. He chuckled, walking back around the house, the music once again becoming louder. Don't worry, I'll place you down before we get to the gathering. So what do you want to eat first? My yum yum, I said without thinking. Our eyes met, green against blue, our hearts racing before I hugged him tightly. I'm serious. You don't need to always be strong around me. Rayhan. If something is upsetting you, please share it with me. I said softly. He touched his forehead to mine. I promise I will. My baby girl is strong and I'm so proud of the woman you are. My heart swelled at his words, and for a moment, I was proud that I had remained strong despite everything that I had gone through. Dulsanra, the evening was going by nicely, Alpha Amir even asked me to dance, and although I was terrified, I did okay. All the while, he kept the conversation going about random topics, from the weather to Rayhan growing up to remembering Maria's initiation into the pack. Everyone congratulated me, and to my surprise, there was an entire table laden with gifts from everyone who had visited set to the side too. I was now sitting with Rayhan, Lola, Rose, Chris, and Rayhana. We had just finished eating and soon I would be initiated into the pack. I was nervous and a little scared too. This was it. Dulsanra, could I have a word? I looked up to see Luna Scarlet, Kiara's gorgeous mom. My heart clenched when, for a moment, she reminded me of my own mother. Sure. I said, getting up, blushing when Rayhan trailed his hand down. Luna Scarlet smirked. There are a few hours left of celebration, Rayhan. She said. Unless we skip to the end. Rayhan shot back lightly. I poked my eyes out at him, realizing his eyes were fixed on me. Chris hooted, and Rayhan shoved him. I shook my head, walking beside the Luna, wondering what she wanted to talk about. You're probably going to be tired of hearing this, but first of all, thank you for telling us the location of Endora's attack. It was my pack. If we had left it with only half its defenses, I shudder to think what might have happened. She said, sighing as she looked up at the sky. She was indeed Kiara's mother, with her curves in that black dress of hers. It's okay, I just gave you a date. The rest was all you guys. I said, shrugging. She stopped when we were at the far corner of the garden, near a luxury cabin which Rayhan said was his uncle's. She turned to me, crossing her arms. I could tell she wasn't the most chatty person, but I got a pleasant vibe from her. She was strong too. I know it may not be my place. But I know you have suffered a lot, beyond anything anyone should ever have to suffer. I just wanted to let you know. I'm always here if you want to talk. I suffered at the hands of my father when I was a child. He discovered I healed extremely fast, so decided to make me his favorite punch bag, and I told no one. The trauma of abuse isn't something that just goes away once it stops. It stays with us throughout our lives, one way or another. Some days may be okay, others may be darker. My heart thundered as I listened to her. It was true. Those memories still come back. She reached out, placing a hand on my upper arm. You are so strong for withstanding it all, but know that we are all here for you. And when it comes to this, I am definitely here, even if it's just someone to text or chat with when you are having a bad day. Here's my number, she said, passing me a folded square of paper. Thank you, I said, taking it. Guess we both had pieces of shits for Dad's hey, she said. Seems like you know a lot, I replied with a small smile. She smirked. Elijah is on the council, and our families are rather tight. We're working on finding those werewolves who are behind it all, and we will do it fast. I nodded. That made sense. Shall we return? I think it's almost time for your initiation, she said, brushing her red hair back. I nodded and we both returned to the rest. Rayhan stood up, gripping me at the same time as Alpha Elijah pulled Scarlet into his arm. I missed you, kitten, Alpha Elijah said. Come on, kitten, Rayhan said at the exact moment. Both men looked at each other and the older Alpha frowned. That was my word first, he said. Yeah, well I'm sure Auntie Red is no longer a kitten but a cat now, right? Rayhan said with a smirk. You calling me old kid? Luna Scarlet said, narrowing her eyes. Seems like it, Alpha Elijah said frowning. He didn't mean that, and I'm sure there are plenty of kittens in the world, I said, blushing when I realized they were arguing over pet names. Well, none as special as mine, Rayhan said, enclosing me in his arms. Same goes for mine, Alpha Elijah replied possessively. Our eyes met, and he gave me a small smile despite his words. I smiled back, before burying my head in Rayhan's chest. I felt so content here, I just wish that once Reginald and the others were caught, and the werewolves, we could all return to living this perfect, happy life. It's time, Rayhan said, kissing my hands softly. I didn't miss his gaze dipping to my cleavage. I smirked as he led me towards the tree that was lit brightly with lanterns. Papa Raf was waiting beneath it, a warm smile on his face. He held his hand out to me as the music was lowered and the chatter died down. Everyone gathered around, and Rayhan stood on my other side, his arms around my waist as I took Papa Raf's hand, stepping closer. Thank you to everyone for coming tonight. I think we all had to admit the drinks and food were indeed needed, Papa Raf said, making everyone chuckle. But most importantly, we are here to welcome our future Luna into this pack. The beautiful, strong, brave, and compassionate Dulsanra. One who has helped us long before we even knew she was Rayhan's mate. Always treat her with the love and respect that she deserves. There is not one woman who I would be prouder to have as my daughter, as my son's mate, and the future Luna of this pack to carry on my legacy, he said clearly. His warm brown eyes didn't leave mine, the warmth and love in his voice made me feel emotional. One day, when I am no longer around, I'll be content, because I know that I am leaving my pack in good hands, ones who will nurture and grow this pack to new heights. He continued. His eyes were locked with mine, and I promised silently that I would always make him proud. We will take the oath and bind it with blood, he said warmly. I nodded. I knew this part, Rayhan had already told me. Do you, Dulsanra Diana Silver, pledge your allegiance to the Black Storm Pack, to your alpha, and promise to always treat this pack as your own? Papa Raf asked. I, Dulsanra Diana Silver, pledge my allegiance to the Black Storm Pack, to my alpha, and promise to always treat this pack as my family, I said clearly. Rayhan took my hand as Luna Maria passed Papa Raf a knife. He sliced his own hand before he looked at me. I smiled and held my hand out. One slice of a knife was nothing. He made a small cut, passing the knife back before we combined our hands, sealing our oath. I felt a strange surge go through me and I shivered, smiling as I realized I was somehow connected to the pack, despite not being a werewolf. The bond was there. Everyone clapped and cheered. Rayhan stepped away, his hand now on my waist. I give you, the future Luna of the Black Storm, my mate Dulsanra, he said, his eyes fixed on me. Shouts of welcome to the pack, congratulations Luna, and much more, all blended into one. Rayhan took my hand, running his tongue along my cut, making my core throb. Someone in the crowd whistled and I knew it was Chris, but I couldn't bother turning to look. My eyes locked with Rayhan's grey ones. Come, let's get a drink too, he said. Luna. Okay, Alpha, I replied, tiptoeing and kissing his cheek, glad that I could at least reach with these heels. Come on, bottoms up, Rayhana said, as Chris, Lola and Rayhan were having a drinking competition. It was much later, the mamas and papas had retreated for the night with the kiddies. It was mostly just young adults left. I want my girl to at least be walking by the end of this, Rose said unhappily. Oh hun, they'll be fine, Rayhan replied. I simply smiled watching Rayhan down shot after shot. It didn't look like it was affecting him. Rayhan's in the lead, I said proudly. I sure am, and he'll still be perfectly fine later, Rayhan said, pulling me into his lap and burying his nose in my neck. Rayhan, I said, gasping when he kissed my neck, his hand trailing up on me. Okay, he's a little drunk, Lola snickered. As are you, babe, Rose said, brushing her hair back. Not really, I'm all good, Lola said, trying to remain upright. Yeah, one shove and you'll be on the floor, Chris said, only for Lola to smack him one, making him almost tumble out of his seat. Yeah, I'd like to see who will be on there sorry, she growled. Okay, you lot are so drunk, and last time you were taking pictures of me and Del, Rayhana said, cupping her face. Rose looked guilty as she picked her phone up. More pictures, she said. I was sure she was the one who took the pictures last time, I smiled in amusement. Yes, Rayhana exclaimed, taking the phone from her. Chris smirked. If you want to do a photo shoot princess, I'm open to any type, he said, with a wink. Rayhana blushed, rolling her eyes. Whatever Chris, because if I take you up on that, it's going to be you in a thong and tutu. Lola and Rayhan burst out laughing, and I smiled as Chris shrugged. We can all agree Rayhan and Lola would look way better in those, I mean, they've got the high eye and stuff for it. Leave my yum-yum's hair alone, I said, running my fingers through it, pouting. God, he was so gorgeous. So yum-yum. Why that name? Lola asked, tilting her head. Because he's so lockable and delicious, I said before I realized what I had just said. Rayhan simply smirked, clearly satisfied with that reply as the rest began teasing. I don't want to know if he's lockable. My mind needs to be cleansed. Rayhan shrieked. So he tastes sweet? Rose asked, bursting into giggles. Wrong image, wrong image. Lola grumbled. Leave her alone. Rayhan said the moment I buried my head in his neck, blushing. He moved a brow at Rayhan before tilting his head. Ri. How come Blake didn't come? Today was the Luna's welcoming ceremony. Rayhan sighed, swirling her drink in her glass. I think he's been avoiding me since a while back, but he was here. Didn't he come over to congratulate you guys? She asked surprised, taking a sip of her drink. I actually realized I hadn't seen this man at all, apart from a few distant glimpses. Why is he avoiding you, babe? Rose asked Rayhan, taking Lola's glass from her. Lola didn't seem to argue, she had definitely overdone it. Since I kinda had a little disagreement with him. She mumbled. What do you mean disagreement? Chris asked sharply. Any signs of being drunk seemed to have vanished. Nothing. Just the day I called you when I was angry. I kind of turned him down. She whispered, leaning forward so only we could hear her. What? He's 26 and is supposed to be your guard. Rayhan growled. Hey, I handled it and it was my fault, not his. Besides, age is just a number, Rayhan. So, I think he's just hurting, but I'm sure he'll be okay. He's taking me to the shops tomorrow. Rayhan said, sighing. Yeah, probably has a bruised ego. Chris said, clearly annoyed. He needs to keep his hands off of you. I looked at him, smiling, as Rayhan seemed to have a faint blush on her bronzed cheek. Yet, she said. I looked around, thinking how the night had been lovely. So, the blood moon is soon. Chris murmured, looking up at the sky. Yet, Rayhan said. No one spoke, this moment was theirs. Rayhan's arms tightened around me and he shamelessly buried his head. I simply ran my fingers through his hair, hugging him tightly. I hoped Rayhan and Chris got there happily ever after too. Dulsanra, the week had gone by in a pleasant blur and things had been great. Luna Maria had had a word with me and apologized once again. She knew some of what I had gone through and said she knew that even werewolves could be monsters. She hoped I would get justice soon. I hoped so because I wanted to bury all my skeletons from the past and start afresh. Rayhan was perfect, in every way. In the mornings, he'd wake up, head to training before returning and spending some time with me before we had breakfast and parted ways again. I know he was working hard on tracking the witch hunter group. I was told to focus on my studies, and Papa Raf himself was helping me with the core subjects when he realized that I felt uncomfortable with a tutor. I mean, I was 19 and doing children's work, but Papa Raf never once treated me like a child or anything. We'd sit together in the lounge, and sometimes he'd something when he couldn't remember what the answer was, which would make me smile. I wasn't sure if he actually couldn't, but either way, it was nice when he complained that studies seemed hard. The morning was spent studying until lunch, but around 1 am, Maria would come by and drop us some snacks. I actually loved this part. There were always hot drinks and freshly baked goodies. And yum-yums. Sometimes she'd spend a little time with us, other times she'd go about her duties. Rayhana was at uni some days, and she was super busy, but I also knew the stress of the upcoming ball was weighing down upon her. But in all, it was great. Oh, cinnamon rolls. Thank you, my dove. Papa Raf said when Maria placed the tray down. He took her hand and kissed it gently. I made those and the yum-yums, she said, smiling at us. You are indeed the queen of baking, Papa Raf said, as she took a seat next to him. When you bake anyway, the days are far and few. I smiled, a queen of making yum-yums. Especially my king yum-yum. I suppressed a giggle at that thought. I missed him. I hadn't seen him since the morning. Well, I know the chef's bakes are a lot better, Maria said gracefully. The preparations for the mating ball are all done, so that's a bonus. Ah, Papa Raf said with a small smile. Is it evil of me that I'm hoping Rayhana doesn't find her mate yet? Not at all, Maria said amused. No, but I hope she does, I said smiling. Please let it be Chris. Papa Raf. Does a werewolf have to choose their mates? Like what if you love someone enough that you don't want a mate? That doesn't actually happen often. However, there are many that don't work, and rejections do happen. But there was one man who was willing to forsake his mate for his love. Elijah, Kiara's dad. I looked at him, picking up a yum-yum as he told me the story of how their love had been something no one approved of. How Elijah was ready to defy all odds for his queen. Then there's our story, Maria added with a small smile. Papa Raf chuckled. I don't think I did good, he mumbled guiltily. I looked at them curiously. Tell me. Well, my father is rather traditional, and well, he said that I could go with my mate once we had married one another, Maria said, blushing slightly. And I don't think this Rossi understood that. Papa Raf smirked. Well, when you tell a Rossi to stay away from their mate, it isn't something we understand, he said, kissing her cheek softly. She smiled. So, what happened? I asked curiously, wiping my hand on a tissue. He forcefully snuck into my room, several times, trying to win me over or steal a few kisses. I tried to tell him that he needed to behave. She pouted and shook her head, reminding me of Rayhana. That's really sweet though, at least he knew how to charm his way in, just like Rayhan, I said. Yes indeed. See? She sees it was sweet, Papa Raf said, smiling. It was sweet and terrifying, Maria said. I knew how that must have felt. That just added to the excitement. He winked at her. I think they wouldn't mind some alone time. My phone beeped and I knew Rayhana was home. Perfect timing. Papa RAF, can we stop for today? I know Rayhana will be back soon and her dress is coming today too. I said. And I think you and Luna Maria should spend some time together. I froze realizing I had addressed her as Luna. I tried not to directly call her, but it was going to take me some time not to call her Luna. She told me to call her Auntie, but I needed time. But even if I messed up, neither let it on. Okay, dear. Papa RAF said, and I picked up a plate, putting some treats on. Thank you for these. I said before leaving the room, unlocking my phone. I read the message from Rayhana. Hun, my dress. It's perfect. I headed upstairs with a smile, I couldn't wait to see it. I almost knocked into someone, sorry. I said, he grunted, before he continued down the stairs. I frowned, watching the man walk out swiftly. He seemed oddly familiar. It must be Blake, I had seen his back a few times. I shook my head and headed towards Rayhana's room. The door was open, and she was opening a dress bag. I placed the plate down and she tuned to me, giving me a smile. I'm so excited! Rayhana exclaimed. Unzipping the bag, she took out such a gorgeous dress that I couldn't stop the whistle that escaped my lips. Oh wow, that is beautiful! I said. It was nothing like I imagined she'd go for, but looking at it, it was so Rayhana. She was definitely going to stand out at the ball. The dress had an elegance to it. Thank you, I tried it on there and the fitting was lush, babe. She exclaimed, pressing it against her. I smiled, glad her worries about the ball were gone, even if it was momentarily. He is going to love it. She whispered. I looked at her, my curiosity piquing. "Ri, what are you planning on doing?" I asked. She turned towards me, placing the dress down gently. "I'll go to the bal. If my mate is there, I will reject him. I want Chris," she said stubbornly. "That's the first time you admitted that, so openly," I said. "With only 2 days until the blood moon, you must be going crazy." I always wanted to go to these things, pick out a lavish dress every time, but this time, I don't want to meet a mate I don't want. She sighed, picking up a yum-yum and wrinkling her nose before dropping it on the plate. "I swear you've ruined yum-yums for me." I giggled, taking the one she dropped and biting into it. "Perfect for me. My plan is to take over all the yum-yum in the world and eat them all," I said, making her smile. "You know. What if Chris is your mate?" "There's a chance he could be," she said wistfully, playing with a strand of her hair. 2 days, we will find out in 2 days. I said softly. She nodded, her heart racing as our eyes met. 2 days. Rayhana, the blood moon. My heart had been pounding since morning and I was terrified, scared of a million things. Night had fallen, Mom was now working on my hair. I had done my own makeup and, despite feeling like a mess inside, I remained as composed as I could. Dulsanra didn't leave my side all day and I appreciated it. Even when I had my henna done the night before, I couldn't think of anything but Chris. I hadn't seen him for the last few days and I missed him. I hated that he was telling me to wait. Didn't my love mean anything to him? I now looked at the black stain of my henna as it weaved up my arms, my eyes landing on the small name I had told the lady to add. Chris, I had already made my decision. Rayhana. Mom said with concern. I looked up. Are you all right? She asked softly. I placed my hand on top of hers on my shoulder and nodded. I was glad I had her back. I won't ever forget the night I came home. She had apologized, broken down, and begged for forgiveness. I'm fine, I said, my heart thudding. You don't need to go if you do not wish to, she said softly. I looked up at her and I knew she knew why. Dulsanra stood next to us, removing my earrings from the box. I need to, I said. He had said just one blood moon. Okay, Mom said softly as she applied some hairspray to my hair. I breathed heavily, standing up, looking in the mirror. I looked like a bride or a princess. I smiled. Perfect, because this was my last blood moon. You look beautiful, Dulsanra said. Mom nodded her agreement. This is it, isn't it? She said softly. I nodded, slipping on my embellished heels. I know what I want, and I will get it. That's my girl, Dad said from the door. My heart skipped a beat seeing both he and Rayhan standing there. When had they arrived? Rayhan was smirking, and Dad was smiling warmly. Did they all know? I frowned at Rayhan, who raised his hands defensively. I said nothing. Now you did, Dulsanra said disapprovingly. I smiled watching Rayhan's eyes run over her, the love and desire in his eyes so strong. I wanted a love like that, like Dad and Mom's, like Uncle's and Kiara's. I wanted him. Well, time to get dressed, Dulsanra said, picking up my dress as I put on the earrings she had passed me. I took a shuddering breath. Taking the dress from her, I walked to the bathroom, my heart pounding with every step I took. She's going to be okay, Mom whispered as if I couldn't hear. I smiled though, she wasn't mind-linking because of Del. I loved that. I shut the bathroom door behind me, and I leant against it, the coolness of the wood pleasant against my silk gown as I took a deep breath. Fear had begun to plague me, and all I could think of was Chris. What if he somehow came to the ball? What if he found his mate? What if? Stop it, Ri. My wolf's restlessness wasn't helping either. Okay, I got this. Deep breaths and focus. I slid my nightgown off and looked in the large mirror opposite. My entire body glowed with shimmer. I wore a lacy nude strapless bodysuit as my lace dress was sheer. My arms and hands were covered in a henna tattoo and my nails were fresh nude acrylics with a glitter tip. My eyes were smoky and alluring with winged liner, my lips were painted a gorgeous brown and my highlighter popped perfectly. Diamond studs were in my additional ear piercings, with large statement earrings in my front piercings. My high eye was in a quiff with a fringe, and the rest was styled into lush curls and pinned to perfection. My hands trembled ever so slightly as I unzipped the dress. It was stunning in a champagne color. The entire dress was made with embroidery on a luxurious net with some beads detailing. Thin straps and a dipping sweetheart neckline completed it. It was figure-hugging and trailed to the ground. There were tulle layers on the right side of the dress, along with a high slit. I slipped it on, my hands shaking when there was a light tap on the door. "Come in," I said. The door opened and Dell slipped in. "I thought you might need some help," she said. I smiled slightly. "Yeah," I said, unable to even string two words together. She walked over to me, slipping the zip up. Mom and Dad were going to the ball, but Dulsanra and Rayhan weren't. Although she had asked me if I wanted her there, I told her to enjoy the time with Rayhan. He had been busy too. Their extensive research on trying to crack down on the witch hunter was taking up a lot of his time. Tonight, I heard they were going to watch a movie, but I doubt there'd be much movie watching. "I'll be awaiting the good news tomorrow," she said softly. I nodded. "Good news, Chris." An hour had passed, and I was now arm in arm with Dad, Mom on his other side as we reached the venue where the mating ball would be hosted. Dad looked handsome in black, and Mom, as always, looked gorgeous. Tonight she was in a deep maroon gown, her hair up in an elegant bun. My beautiful parents, the perfect couple. I looked at the shimmering lights of the venue. With each step, my heart was twisting. I wanted to turn back, turn away. We walked up the shimmering marble steps. The guards that flanked the doors bowed their heads and music filled my ears, but I couldn't do it. "Rayhana," Dad said softly. I looked at him, realizing I had stopped. My chest was heaving and I shook my head. "I don't want anyone else," I whispered, my eyes blurring with tears. Mom and Dad exchanged looks before they smiled at me. "Above all, what matters is what is inside. If it's Chris, then go to him," Dad said. I smiled. I didn't need to say anything for my parents to know. "Thank you, Dad," I said softly. Mom kissed my cheek. "He's a good kid," she said as I leant into her touch. Dad leant over, kissing my forehead. "Whatever you decide, we will support your decision," he said softly. I looked up at him. How could a girl be so lucky to have an angel for a father? I hugged him tightly, trying not to. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Princess, I always will," he said, smiling warmly. I nodded, brushing away my tears before I spun around, lifting my dress as I ran down the stairs. "I'm sorry, Chris, but I don't need to see my mate to know I want you. I'm coming." I ran as fast as I could, getting into the car that drove us here. "Back to the pack," I said breathlessly, slamming the door shut behind me, startling the driver. "Cole," Dad's driver smiled and nodded, despite being alarmed by my abrupt entrance. "Yes, Miss R.I." My heart was thumping as he drove us back. The 15-minute drive was driving me crazy. The moment I saw the trees signaling we were close, I took a deep breath. "Chris," I called through the link. His voice sounded almost afraid, as if I was going to tell him something he didn't want to hear. "I'm sorry, hey, it's okay, I'm happy for you. Do I mean so little to you? I'm sorry because I am breaking our agreement. I'm not going to that ball, I want you, Chris. I'm admitting this, and I swear if you turn me down I'm going to castrate you. If I can't have you, no one can." His weak chuckle came through the link, but I could feel his relief. Was this his test to prove that I really loved him? Are you sure? Because if you make this choice, there's no turning back. I want you forever. His words made my stomach erupt with butterflies. And I want to be with you forever, I whispered. Stop the car, I said, making Cole brake sharply. Thank you, I said, opening the door as I got out quickly. Princess, I'm okay. I promise. Every blood moon, let's hole up, away from the world. We can watch anything you want, we'll stay inside, together. Forever. I promise I'll always be there. I whispered through the link as I ran towards his house. My heart was thundering as I saw the lights were on. Forever is a long time, princess. Do you want forever? I asked as I ran through the gates, sliding between his two cars and reaching the door. I want more, than forever, came his reply, sending my heart pounding even faster, just as I knocked on the door. Good, because so do I whispered back, my heart aching. I wanted him, so much. The door opened to reveal a shirtless Chris and I froze. He was in nothing but a pair of blue jeans, a glass of alcohol in his hands, his hair a mess and his sharp, gorgeous green eyes that ran over me, blazing gold before he stared into mine. But it was not his killer looks that had rendered me speechless. It was the mind-blowing scent that enveloped me completely. Spice, winter snow, and that undertone was making me dizzy. His eyes widened in shock as we stood there frozen. My mate. He's my mate. Chris, I stared at the goddess before me, my heaven on earth. Her scent hit me. Everything about her was 1,000 times more breathtaking, if that was even possible. The dress she wore wrapped around her curves alluringly, and there was not one thing about her that didn't beg for me to worship it. Above all, she was made for me. My mate, my heaven on earth. You're mine, I growled, not even realizing how possessive I sounded until those words left my lips. Her chocolate-colored eyes widened, and she smiled softly. I'm yours, she whispered. I pulled her into my arms, one hand going behind her neck. Our eyes met for a split second, her arms locking around my neck as our lips crashed against each other with deep passion. My glass fell to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces, but neither of us cared. Explosive sparks coursed through me, blood rushed south, and never had anything felt so good. My eye fluttered shut and all I could focus on was the feel of her body crushed against mine, her sweet, honeyed mouth and the feel of her hands and lips on me. A soft moan left her lips as our lips fought for dominance, moving in perfect sync. The hunger, relief, love, and passion in our touch were everything I could have dreamt of and more. She pushed me inside, slamming me against the wall, her hands running down. I pushed the door shut, turning us so she was the one pressed against the wall. I broke away from her lips breathlessly, trailing kisses down her neck. My hands roaming every inch of her body. I crushed myself against her. The urge to mark her right now was strong. So strong. My wolf's restlessness only heightened. Her hand tangled in my hair, yanking my head away from her neck before she kissed me hungrily once more, her other hand raking down my back before it landed. I groaned, pressing myself against her. Are you already hard for me, baby? She teased, breathless. Hard, or is that not clear enough? I murmured back, kissing her along her collarbones and down towards her. This woman was blessed with more beauty than one woman ever should be, but I'm not complaining. I get her, all of her. My hands roamed over her dress, searching for her zip. Maybe it'll be clear if you weren't in those jeans, she whispered. Her arousal hung in the air, and all I wanted was to bury my head between her thighs and eat her out like I was starved. Glad we're on the same page, I murmured, pulling zipper down. I stepped back, slowly slipping her dress down from her shoulders, my eyes darkening as her body came into view, now clad in only a bodysuit. What you see, handsome? She teased. Goddess, that's it, Chris. She whimpered. I didn't stop kissing her as I carried her up the stairs and towards my room. Oh, Chris. She moaned, kissing my neck hungrily. Princess, I groaned. Kicking the door open, I entered, slamming it shut behind us. You're beautiful everywhere, Princess, I whispered. Guess we're the perfect match then, she said softly, kissing my neck and shoulders. I want you, Princess, I murmured, kissing her lips as I pressed against her entrance. She bit her lip, her smirk vanishing, and she locked her arms around my neck. I want you too, she whispered. Are you sure? I asked softly. Despite wanting to ram into her right now, her heart was beating too fast and she seemed suddenly nervous. Yes, it's just that it's my first time, so go easy on me, she whispered. My eyes flew open in shock. What? How? She was confident. She didn't act like a single. She rolled her eyes. Are you being a pig again? Just because I'm a single, what were you expecting? Me to act shy and lost? She asked with a pout, despite kissing my lips in between her words. Kinda, I replied, with a smirk. Don't believe I'm a single? She asked, twisting her hand in the back of my hair. I smirked. How about I find out? I whispered, gently pressing at her entrance. I knew she was, from the way she was nervous despite her confidence. And yes, I was proud that she was all mine and no one else had what was mine. Yeah, double standards since I've been a whore, but I was still feeling about it. I looked down at her, she hissed, her nails digging into my shoulder. I love you, Rehana. You were and are the only woman who has ever made me feel this way. A woman I want forever. My one and only love, I whispered quietly. Her eyes were filled with emotions, and she kissed me once more as I penetrated her. She cried out in pain and I stilled, kissing her softly. I didn't want to hurt her, yet the urge to begin her was taking over. I fought against it, slowly pushing myself in completely. Her eyes stung with tears and I kissed the corner of her eyes softly. I'm sorry, I said softly. I'm okay, keep moving, she whispered, taking a deep, shuddering breath. It gets easier, I whispered back. I moved slowly, relishing the feeling of her, hoping she could feel how much she meant to me. Our eyes never left each other as we made love, and soon she began to relax. I sped up ever so slightly, holding out my own release. That's it, Chris, she whimpered, and I knew that pleasure was overriding the pain. Mark me, I didn't need telling twice. Feeling her nearing, I tangled my hand into her hair, tilting her head as I bit into her neck. Never had anything felt so good. I groaned as I rode it out, pulling out of her. Spent. I love you, Chris. She whispered. Love you too, princess, I said, moving away gently. I got off the bed, grabbing a t-shirt I had discarded earlier and gently wiped her clean between her legs. Thanks, she said, blushing lightly. She looked stunning. Her hair that had been styled perfectly, was a mess, her cheeks were flushed and her lips looked even more plumper. Her body was a work of art, one I had left my mark all over. My mark. My heart thudded as I tossed the t-shirt aside. This was real. Pulling the top duvet off the bed, I rolled it up, tossing it aside and moved back the blanket. She got in and I slid in next to her, wrapping my arms around her and pulling her to me. I hope this isn't a dream, I muttered. I assure you it isn't, she said softly. But it feels like one. I never thought you'd be my mate, I hoped once or twice. I hugged her tightly, my naughty little princess. Yet? I don't think I deserve you. Well, I am amazing, she said airily. I chuckled. Yeah, that's my princess. My mate, one I thought I never wanted, was I wrong? Rayhana, that's it. Goddess, I would never tire of him. Your heaven, princess, he whispered, making me shudder with renewed pleasure. Love you, girl. I smiled. I love you too. I hugged him tightly, our lips meeting in an enchanting kiss that made the world fade away. 3 hours later, we were dressed, fed, and cuddled up on the sofa in Chris' living room. He currently lived alone, now that his youngest sibling had gone off to university down south. But I knew how much Chris did after his parents' deaths. I was proud of this man, despite all his faults. He was a good son, brother, friend, Delta, and above all, my mate. I know I'm incredibly handsome, princess, but you don't need to stare so much, he remarked with a smirk, his finger running soft circles there, making my entire body tingle. I rolled my eyes. Don't get too full of yourself, I was just wondering how much time you spent on pampering this face of yours, I said, squeezing his jaw tightly. Not anywhere near as much as I'll spend pampering you. His reply threw me off, my heartbeat quickening. I hate that he renders me speechless, I pouted, hugging him. I'd never admit that though. He snickered. Are you actually shy? No. There is a difference between being shy and just being surprised that you can actually be charming, I said, smacking his arm. Ouch, that hurts. He faked massaging his arm. Whatever, I know it didn't, I said. We were tangled together, me lying right on top of him. It felt so perfect though, me and him, us. This was how it was always meant to be. I kissed him softly, then he kissed me back deeply. I moved away from his lips and stared at my mark that graced his neck. A moon and the silhouette of a wolf with its head raised. His mark on my neck was a howling wolf, a shimmer of green running through the black mark. They're beautiful, I murmured. Yeah, Chris said, brushing his finger down my neck. I shivered under his touch, sighing softly. He chuckled and I raised an eyebrow. What is it? Rayhan said your parents want us to come for dinner. He said, smirking. My stomach fluttered. Did you say we're fated mates? No, I didn't even say we're here right now. He smirked. Rayhan annoyed. Nah, he just sounded stiff. He snickered. Oh goddess, you are going to taunt him, aren't you? I asked. Definitely. He replied. I can't wait for you to meet Uncle Al as my mate. Oh, I'm not afraid, because as much as he'll probably want to castrate me, he'll know this blonde hunk equals his niece's happiness. He said. I rolled my eyes. Okay, I get it, ugh. You are just going to be 10 times C***year now, aren't you? Yeah, obviously. You're my mate, meant for me, so you know I must be worth something. He said, stretching before tightening his arms around me. I rested my head on him, listening to his beating heart. You're priceless, baby. I whispered, closing my eyes. Neither of us spoke, simply basking in the other's company. Night had fallen, Chris and I had just arrived back home. My cheeks were burning, and despite the fact that we last had sex at 2 p.m., my lower region felt very sore. Ugh, this is so awkward. Retuning home knowing the entire world knows you did the deed is weird. Relax, ma chérie. He said, making my stomach knot. Did he just call me? I blushed, thinking that was hot. I was so distracted that I didn't even notice the door opening to reveal Rayhan and Dulsanra until she called me. R.I. I looked at her, smiling, before I hugged her tightly. Del. I'm so sorry I was meant to call A&D. You're forgiven, I don't think anyone can think of calling when you're with your love. She whispered, moving away from me. Well, you should have called to ask. I thought let you two enjoy the morning. She said, winking, making Chris chuckle and Rayhan frown. I smiled at her. How did I get so lucky to have an amazing friend and sister? One who will always be in the same pack as me? I was lucky, that was for sure. We both looked at Rayhan, whose face was emotionless, his jaw set in its usual way that just made him look arrogant. I knew he didn't know how to react. I turned to Chris, who had a small smirk on his lips, but I knew he was not. He just didn't know how to act either. I realized smiling and smirking was his natural reflex most of the time. I have news. I said, making Rayhan's attention snap to me, his gaze falling to my neck. You're marked. Yes, but that's not what I wanted to tell you guys, I said as Dulsanra subtly, or tried to, pushed Rayhan towards me. What is it? Rayhan asked, sighing as he gave me a tight hug. You smell of him. He stepped away, wrinkling his nose, making Chris snicker. Well, obviously. He said, earning himself a glare from Rayhan. I thought you wanted us happy. Yeah, still it's weird. Rayhan said, running his fingers through his hair as Dulsanra locked her arms around his waist. He hugged her, inhaling her hair. I knew it calmed him. Okay, now was my chance. We actually are fated mates. Destined by the moon goddess for one another, I stated proudly. Rayhan's eyes snapped to Chris, then frowned. Wow. Yeah, wow. Chris said, pulling me into his arms and cupping the back of my head, kissing my lips softly. This is going to take time. Rayhan groaned, making Dulsanra giggle. I love how men think it's okay to do as they wish, yet when it's their sisters, Dulsanra trailed off, amused as we all trooped inside. She looked at us both and smiled. I am happy for you too. I really am. I think you two are the perfect couple. Right, my yum yum? I smirked at the way her voice dipped and became soft. Yes, she was my brother's undoing and he knew it. Yeah, sure kitten. If they're happy, I'm glad, and I'm happy for them, but doesn't mean it's going to be easy to see it. He replied, smiling down at her. I knew he was happy for us. Chris had told me this morning the small exchange between them about us. My only issue was, why hadn't Chris fought for me? He had got a smack for that. They were just about to kiss when Mom and Dad entered the hall. You guys were taking forever, so we thought we'd pop out. Dad said, smiling as Mom's gaze fell on me. She came over quickly, hugging me tightly. Rayhana. Mom. I said, hugging her back. Her heart was racing, and I could sense the relief from her. Son. Dad said, hugging Chris before he met me. I hugged him. I moved back as Mom gave Chris a kiss on the forehead. Dad. Mom. Chris is my fated mate. I said, even though I had said those words minutes earlier to Ray and Del, they still felt surreal. Mom gasped. She looked between Chris and me before a smile crossed her lips as Dad smiled. That's great news, he said. And one that calls for a celebration. Mom said. I'm sure the setup in there is one, Rayhan. That was a surprise. Del hissed, as Mom glared at him unhappily. Ya hey Atai. She scolded. Sorry. Rayhan said, as Dad chuckled. Well, come on in, the food is waiting for us. He said, patting his flat stomach. I smiled as Chris took my hand, and we all walked towards the lounge. I couldn't stop the smile from crossing my lips. Life really was great. Dulsanra, it has been a week since the ball, and everything was going great. Rayhan had found a lead on the witch hunter group, and last night he had gone to question his cousin Alpha Zion after finding some information on them too. This morning we learned that he and Alpha Amir had questioned him, and found out that although he wasn't part of the group, he funded it. Zion refused to give more information. That was not the smart thing to do when it came to someone like Rayhan. Maria was worried, as Rayhan's anger was well known, and Papa Raf was clearly concerned too. Would Alpha Zion have the answers? Rayhan was adamant that he would know who he was funding. I couldn't even focus on anything as I stared at the periodic table. I was finally advancing a little to secondary education, but today nothing was helping me focus. My phone beeped and I picked it up, glancing at Papa Raf who was massaging his temples. Want to go out for a bit? I was going to the shops anyway. Chris is working. Rayhana's message read. I think I could use a breakaway. Papa Raf, Rayhana, and I are going to go out for a bit. I said, standing up. He looked up, concerned. Out? "Yeah, to the shops," I said. "I don't think it's safe. I don't want to be controlling, but you are a target, Dulsanra. Let Rayhan return at least," he said, standing up, looking at me apologetically. I sighed, "No, I understand. Then I'll just go over to Rayhana's and we'll just chill together," I replied. I quickly texted Rayhana the update. He smiled, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "That sounds good. Come on, I'll drop you there," he said warmly. I smiled, not bothering to argue as we both left the house. The sun was out and the leaves on the trees rustled. Spring was here, and with it, plenty of warmth. "Well, you girls have fun," Papa Raf said looking up at the house. Although we saw Rayhana daily, I knew he missed having her at home. He followed me to the door, greeting Rayhana before he left us, telling us to contact him when we wanted to leave the house. We nodded before we went inside and shut the door behind us. "Hey," I said, walking through to the living room. "Listen. Blake just linked, saying he wanted to have a word with me. He's stopping by, is that okay? We won't be long," she said apologetically. I nodded. I knew that Chris had wanted him removed from the position of her bodyguard and that things had been tense between Rayhana and Blake anyway, but I think they did need this talk. "I still haven't seen the man. Maybe I could say hi after you're done," I said with a smile. She smiled and nodded just as the doorbell rang. "That's him," she said, sounding stressed out. "Relax, it'll be okay, he's probably just a little hurt," I whispered. She had told me what had happened between them, and I think he was just having a hard time getting over her. "I should let you two talk alone before I show up," I whispered. She nodded and I motioned that I'd go wait in the kitchen. I leant against the kitchen counter, hearing her open the front door. "Hey Blake, come on in." "Hey, Rayhana." A man's low voice came and I heard their footsteps go into the living room. I honed them out, not wanting to listen in on their conversation, at least giving them some privacy. I walked over to the kitchen sink, looking out at the small garden. Chris's house was one of the larger properties and had its own garden. I heard coughing and Rayhana's exclamation. "Oh, are you okay? Del, can you get some water?" I grabbed a glass, snapping out of my reverie. Filling it, I rushed to the lounge where Blake was hunched over coughing. "Here," I said as Rayhana rubbed his back. "Is he okay?" "I'm fine." He coughed, taking the glass from me. Our eyes met and my blood ran cold. Blake. Blake was. He may never have shown me his face, but those eyes. I'd never forget those eyes. My heart thundered as 100 memories returned to me. He dropped something he was holding and it shattered on the floor. "Sorry." "No worries, I'll get it cleaned up." Rayhana's voice was distant. His eyes never left mine. The one who had caused me the most pain, had been right here, in this pack all along. I could no longer hear anything, my heart pounding, my ears ringing, and the familiar nightmare of fear and helplessness threatening to consume me. I was stronger than that. I knew from the look in his eyes that he knew who I was, and he knew that I knew who he was. The leader of the group that hunted witches. The one who had killed that couple who took me in, the one who had abused me time and time again. The sickest of them all. My eyes burned with anger that had lain dormant, flames surrounding me, but he simply smiled. "It's too late," he said. I glanced at Rayhana, seeing her clutching her head as she clutched the wall. Realizing that whatever he had accidentally dropped on the ground was making everything fade away. No. It wasn't too late. I took a deep breath, ready to send this to hell where he belonged, when I felt my vision sway. "I came prepared," he whispered coldly. I couldn't move. My body was shutting down. I watched as Rayhana crumbled to the ground. If I couldn't move, I'd at least send a signal. Summoning every ounce of willpower in me, I focused on my demon side, letting the fire roll off and travel through the house. I dropped to all fours, my head pounding. "I'm sorry, Chris, but I have to cause some sort of signal." "What?" he hissed. My eyes flashed as I sent the fire blazing towards him, feeling my world darken, but before I succumbed to it, something painful hit my neck, making an agonizing pain blister through me as I fell flat on my face. The last thing I remembered was hoping that someone would come before it was too late. Rayhan, I had spent the entire morning trying to get information out of Zion. He kept saying he didn't know more, but that was impossible. We had checked his records of payments after he had mentioned that he had funded the hunters, but they were made to an anonymous account. I had gotten Dad to probe into it. "One last time, Zion," I hissed, yanking his head back roughly by his hair. I had reached my limit. If playing easy wasn't working, then I'd do this the hard way. I tightened my grip in his hair, slamming his head onto his desk before hauling him backwards. My alpha aura rolled off of me in waves as I glared into his face. He spat blood out of his mouth as his eyes flashed, glaring back at me with pure hatred. "This is my pack. You can't just show up and attack. You broke protocol, Rayhan," he growled. He shoved me, but I didn't talk. Slamming his head into the desk once more, my hair fell in front of my eyes. I used my hand to brush it back. "Protocol. You know more than you are letting on, and if you don't want to give answers, then I have no use for you." I growled menacingly. I raised my hand, ready to go for the kill when a flicker of fear rushed through his eyes. "Wait." I paused, my claws out, ready to tear his heart out. I wasn't sure if I would have done it or not, but it clearly worked. I don't know the name, but the leader of that group is part of your pack," he said, smirking victoriously. My stomach twisted, my heart thundering like a drum as I dropped him. "He'll make sure that Rayhana and your mate are taken care of." He laughed sadistically. My eyes blazed. But I didn't care. He deserved it. The door burst open and Granddad stood there pale. His gaze flickered to Zion before he looked back at me. "Rayhan, you need to go home. Dulsanra and Rayhana have been taken." Those words ran through me like a storm. My worst fear had come true. I was now running through the woods trying to pick up a scent. I had gone on ahead without anyone else, using my abilities to try sniff them out. Uncle Al had contacted the witches to see if they could locate Dulsanra and Rayhana, but it seemed there was something blocking them. They were working on a spell, but I didn't have time. All I knew was that Chris, Dad, Lola, and several others were also on their way. It was Blake. Lola's voice came through the link. He is the only one unaccounted for. Blake. Mom's voice came, sounding shocked. Mom, what are you doing here? I asked, frowning. Those are my daughters. I may not look like much, but I am a skilled swordsman. She replied. I didn't argue. The weight of realization that Blake, someone Dad had taken in years ago, given a home to and treated like our own, had betrayed us all. When I see him, he was dead. Dulsanra, I opened my eyes. It took me a moment to adjust. The smell of blood that covered the ground. The pain in my body. The flames that surrounded me and the chains that bound me. Something I was used to. Everything came rushing back with full force. My heart pounded. Rayhana. Did I hurt her in the fire? Was she okay? I looked around only to see her tied to a post up ahead, unconscious. Luckily, she seemed in a better state than I was. Glancing around, I saw that we were in some abandoned building. My eyes flittered around and I realized I had been here before, a long time ago. I gasped when something hit my back. She's awake, keep her down. A voice that I recognized spoke. Reginald? What was he doing here? We need to do this fast. I don't trust the Rossies. Blake's deep voice came. My heart hammered, his scent filling my nose. Why hadn't I smelled him before? The day he brought Rayhana's dress in? I closed my eyes. The answers were right before me. Magic. How long have you all been in cahoots? I asked coldly. My eyes blazing, and I knew I had shifted, which meant they hadn't managed to suppress me completely, despite the chains laced with magic that bound me. Far longer than you know. It was the plan. One you ruined. Reginald spat venomously, coming into view. He had lost weight, but apart from that, nothing had changed. I thought you hated witches. I shouted at Blake. I do. They killed my mate. But I also hate the Rossi. Why? What have they ever done to you? I hissed. Reginald slammed his foot into my back. I winced but refused to react to the pain that Jared threw me. More than they can ever ask forgiveness for. Blake shot back coldly. And you ruined it all. Looking around, I wondered if Elena and Eldridge were here too? I needed to bide some time so I could come up with a plan. I watched Reginald walk off, wondering what they had planned. Your end is near. I hissed. Blake chuckled dangerously, coming over to me. My heart pounded, remembering everything he had done to me. You are no longer alone, Del. You have a family waiting for you and a sister to protect. Yes, for Rayhana. Hurt me all you want, but I will never allow anyone to hurt those that I love. Our end isn't near. He said, crouching down. He grabbed my face in his fingers, squeezing it painfully hard. You actually look appealing now, shame I didn't see it before. I scoffed. We both know you tried. I whispered with hatred. His smirk vanished, his eyes blazing. Yeah, I thought so. He backhanded me across the face, making me hit the floor hard. My vision darkened for a second and the taste of blood filled my mouth. But I didn't say anything, remembering the day he had tried to shove his dick down my throat, but before he could even manage, I had slammed a fork I had stolen into his balls and vowed I'd rip him off if he brought it anywhere near me again. No one had the right to use my body in that way, it had been the one thing I was able to protect. After that day, he had decided that simply using me as a target for practice wasn't enough. He had degraded me in every other way, torturing me for his own sadistic fun, and he was going to pay for it. Rayhan won't come for you. He won't find you. I smiled coldly. Rayhan would, because he was the best tracker out there. Rayhan had found me when I was 16, and I had used magic to hide from them, well, what little I had. If he found me then, he'd find me now. I knew he would, no matter how much magic they used. I thought you hated witches. Then why are you working with them? I asked him coldly. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. I smirked, seeing the burn marks on his hands and arms. It seemed I had done some damage earlier. I get my revenge. These witches. They hate werewolves thoroughly. Don't you get it? I am the one who killed the witches and the werewolves. I'm the one who made the conflict worse between both kinds. Yes, I hate them, but it is the Black Storm Pack that I wanted to finish, to destroy. To see that bastard Raphael on his knees, the Rossi arrogance will bite the dust. They will all come, the entire Rossi population, and when they do, I will end their line. They will fall for this trap easily. My anger flared at his insult, my chest heaving with anger. Papa Raf has done so much for you. You were an orphan when he found and brought you home. I shouted, remembering Rayhana telling me his story. Blake stood up, turning his back on me. Another jarring pain spasmed around me, and I realized the chains were only getting stronger with each passing minute. I needed to break out of them. Were the others near yet? I needed to know just in case I didn't get far. I had to consider Rayhana. Raphael is the one who killed my father. He just doesn't know it. We were lone wolves just living our life until that bastard killed him. I saw it with my own eyes. I only accepted his invitation, promising myself that one day I'd get my revenge on him. The original plan was to kill them all, his entire family. But then I realized that this beauty was something I wanted. She delayed and spoiled my plans. I glared at him as he walked over to Rayhana, cupping her face. My only relief was that she was unharmed. But now, she's mated too, and turns out to be a witch. He let go of her coldly and smiled. So do you really think they'll find you? Yes. I said coldly. Perfect. Before I could even ask what he meant by that, a menacing growl RPPD through the air as the stained glass window shattered and a huge black wolf came flying in. His aura wrapped around the room like a blanket, but it was his anger and rage as he landed in front of me that made my heart skip a beat at the sheer power of it. Rayhan. He lunged at Blake, but a magical barrier was raised, and I saw Elena standing far up on the landing above. Step down, Mutt, your witch is far too weak to fight. Wrong. I closed my eyes, focusing on the chains that held me. I was not going to let Rayhan do this alone, I would stand and fight by his side as his Luna. The moment I began to break my chains, Blake snapped his fingers, Growls filled the air and the far door opened as a blur of wolves entered. There must have been about 30. They began to circle in on Rayhan. My heart thumped as I realized the place was large enough for them to maneuver easily. All of their eyes were fixed on Rayhan, who was bigger than them, his aura immeasurable, but they had number on their side. Blake smirked. "Well, I don't mind starting with the younger Rossi," he said, shifting as he jumped at Rayhan. Everything happened so fast. Rayhan tossed him aside, ping 2 wolves to pieces as he lunged at Blake. I began to break free from some of the chains that bound me. The entire room suddenly glowed, and I felt a burning pain rush through my legs. Runes. This entire place was spelled and somehow connected to me. Rayhan. Grab Rayhana. Run! I screamed. They were going to hold us here. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, I saw Papa Raf's wolf leap through the entrance, growling menacingly. It took me a few seconds to recognize who the masked woman on his back was. Dressed in black with 2 long curved swords in her hands, she reminded me of an assassin or a warrior princess. Seconds later several other wolves jumped through the entrance before the barrier slammed high, trapping us inside. I came back to reality, realization hitting me hard. No. This was exactly what they wanted. We had been bait. I watched as if in slow motion as Chris Wolf rushed to Rayhana, and Luna Maria jumped off her mate's back, slicing through the closest wolf. Never had I seen a swordswoman move so elegantly yet ruthlessly. I took a deep breath, ready to break free when a whispery voice brushed past my ear. "One thing, Dulsanra, break those chains and the spell will become complete. No one will get to leave at all," it taunted. My heart thudded as I looked down. Sure enough, the spells on the chains were seeping into the ground. "The choice is yours. Your life or your so-called animal families," Elena hissed, making my blood run cold. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.